Hello everyone, Miss Carrie here from Miss Carrie's Creations. I hope you are doing well, staying safe at home, and getting a little crafting in. Recently I was asked by Close to My Heart to feature a design from our Everyday Moments Cricut collection and reimagine it in a few new ways. I can't wait to show you what I created. The Everyday Moments design that Close to My Heart asked me to create was the Heart of Gold card. And as you can see, this is a very simple card full of color. I chose to use Pixie, Bashful, Lagoon, Mint, and Canary on my card to match the design in Design Space. Not only did I create the original card design from the Everyday Moments collection, I also created 3 alternate cards using the same design, and I plan on showing you how I made each one. The first card I created matches the design in Design Space, but I cut it out of watercolor paper and shaded it with watercolor paints. The second card was cut from French vanilla, then backed in beautiful gold foil paper. And on my final card, I chose to flip the design on its side, remove the words, and cut all of the images from the These Are My People paper collection. Before I show you how to assemble these cards, I want to show you how I altered the Everyday Moments Heart of Gold image in Cricut Design Space to create these cards. In my image library under image sets, I'm going to search for the Everyday Moments collection, which I purchased through my Cricut affiliate link. I'll put that link in the description below if you're interested in purchasing it. Under this Everyday Moments collection, you will see the original design I created, which is that Heart of Gold card. Let's go ahead and put that into the canvas so that you can see all of the parts and pieces that are included in this card. In the layers panel, you'll be able to see the 5 ruffle layers with the words cut out, the card back, and the matching envelope. Both the card base and the envelope have score lines, so you will need a scoring stylus on your Explorer machine or a scoring wheel on your Maker to create these 2 images. Now I want to show you how easy it was to alter this design to create the 3 cards that I just showed you. Instead of walking you through the step-by-step creation of each individual card design, I decided that I'm just going to show you how I took the original Heart of Gold image and altered a few bits and pieces to create my new card designs. Let's start with the watercolor card. Each one of these ruffle designs is going to be cut out of watercolor paper, so I can go ahead and change each layer to the same color of gray so that it all cuts out of the same mat. When I go to make this project, I will have to change the material size to 9 by 12 inches. Our watercolor paper pad sheets are 9 by 12. Once I choose the new material size, it will rearrange those cuts onto the mat to fit a 9 by 12 piece of paper. As you can see, it did place 2 of these cuts on another mat. To save paper, I'm just going to select the Move Object button, move the cut to the first mat, rotate the cut, and I can go ahead and add those additional cuts to my original sheet of paper and save some watercolor paper. If you have an Explorer machine, you are going to turn your dial to Custom. If you have a Maker, you will see the list of materials available for you to cut. Both machines are going to have you browse all materials. You're going to search for watercolor paper, select heavy watercolor paper. Once that has been selected, we can go ahead and cut out that card front. Now that the first card's complete, let's take a look at the second card. Each one of these ruffle layers is going to be cut from French vanilla. Instead of going to the ink blot for each individual layer, I am going to use the color sync feature. I'm going to change that top layer to a French vanilla color, then choose color sync. In the color sync panel, I can drag each one of those other layers to my French vanilla color, and each image color will be changed. Using color sync is a quick way to change the color of your images. The next step is to insert a shape for that gold foil backing. If I were to place these onto the card base, my letters would be white. So I need to insert a square, size it to 4.25 wide by 5.5 high, and change the color to gold. Once I send this layer to the back, you'll be able to see that now all of my letters will be shaded in that gold foil color. When I choose Make It, I am going to select a custom material again. This time under my custom materials, I am going to choose the foil paper to cut out that gold foil paper layer. Now let's move on to the third and final card. On this card, I rotated the card base and got rid of the words on each one of the layers. Let me show you how I did that. After ungrouping the image, I deleted one of those ruffle layers and then changed the colors to match the papers that I was cutting the images out of. On this card, I used patterns from the These Are My People collection. To remove the words from each one of those layers, I used the Contour feature. Contour allows me to remove the contours or lines in the image that I do not wish to cut out. On these images, I do not want to cut out the words, so I am using that Contour feature to remove each one of the letters in those ruffle layers. To make all 4 of these layers longer, I am going to select all of them, unlock that little lock up by the size, and change the width. I'm not going to change the height. By unlocking it, the height will remain the same, but I can type in 5.5 for the width, and it will change the width of all 4 of those layers to match the card front. This next step is just a fun little addition that you can add using the perforation blade on your maker. If you've watched any of my other videos here on my YouTube channel, you'll see that I often use that perforation blade to create faux stitching, which is what I did on this card here. Let me show you how I did that. I'm going to insert a score line, rotate that score line 90 degrees so it's going horizontal. Then I'm going to change the line type to perforation for the perforation blade. After I've changed the line type, then I will change the size of the line to 5.5 inches, place the line onto the ruffle layer where I want it to lie, then align that ruffle layer and the perforation line and attach the two together. You will repeat these steps until all 4 layers have perforation lines to create faux stitching. Now that all of our cards have been cut out, I want to give you a few tips and tricks for assembling each one of these cards. We're going to start with that layered watercolor card. Here I have all of my pieces and my watercolor paints on my all-purpose mat. If you don't want to use watercolors, you can mix a re-inker with water and place it in a spray pen and spray each one of these layers. I'm going to use a water paintbrush to brush the paint onto each one of these images, but you could use a water brush if you like. Before I start painting each one of these layers, I want to show you how I prepped each one of these cuts. When we go to assemble the card, we're going to need to glue down the centers of each one of these letters. So I've taken a piece of Post-it tape and I have taped these letters in place temporarily. This allows me to paint the centers of each of the letters with some matching paint and not have to paint them individually. All of my layers are being placed in order over there on the left side, and I'm going to start painting each one with watercolor paint. As you can tell, I have sped up the video as I do this, but I want you to be able to see which colors I'm using. You can choose any colors from that palette to create your card. If you want it more masculine, maybe do some grays, greens, and browns. If you want it very feminine, use all pinks and purples. Personally, I am more partial to blues, but the design of this card allows you to choose whatever color palette you want. As I'm painting, I am just putting the color over on the all-purpose mat there on the right and mixing it with water. It's much easier to add color than it is to take away. So I always start with a lighter color and then I add more pigment as I go. Once you've painted all of the layers, go ahead and set them aside to dry for a few hours, and then we can start assembling our card. After all of my layers dried, I added a little bit of stitching. At the very top, I added some white zigzag, and on all of the other layers, I added stitching with matching thread. Now, if you're a seamstress, you probably have a wonderful collection of thread. If you don't, you can take some white thread and dye it with a re-inker, which is what I did on a few of these layers. Assembling this card is pretty simple. I put down the bottom layer first, and then I laid each of the other layers on top so that I could try to figure out my spacing. Each one of these layers overlaps in the same area where that stitching is, so it was very easy for me to lay each layer right on top of the other. I love how much texture that stitching adds to this card and just makes it pop. So now that I have all of the layers on, I need to glue in the center of each of these letters. You could leave it as is. It looks just fine without each one of those inserts, but I wanted to have the insides of each one of the letters. So I did paint them to match, and now I'm just taking some of my Tumbo glue and a pair of tweezers, and I'm putting all of the centers of the letters inside that card. Now this card is complete. I love how our watercolors give it a soft chalk-like faded look. I really wanted to add a small little button down here at the bottom of the card as an embellishment. Spoiler alert, we have wooden buttons coming next season, and I did happen to snag one to add to my final design. Here's what the original design and the watercolor card look like side by side. As you can see, those watercolors just give it a nice, soft, faded look. The next card is that gold foil card that we cut out of French vanilla, and this one goes together super quick. I have all of the layers cut out from French vanilla, gold foil paper, and the envelope was cut out of vellum. I also have my letters here on some post-it tape so I don't lose them. Again, I added some stitching to the layers. I love the look of stitching, especially on a card as elegant as this. I'm going to fold that card base along the score line that our Cricut created, and then I'm going to adhere that gold foil back onto the front of the card base. Now I can add each one of those ruffle layers onto the front of the card. This time I place the bottom layer and the top layer onto the card first to help me with the spacing of the other layers. When I put that final layer on, I can just simply tuck it under that top ruffle layer. After adhering the letter centers down onto the card, I decided I wanted to add some gold embellishing thread at the top. Since this was an afterthought, I did have to remove that gold foil layer from the card base to add this embellishing thread. To create a bow, I wrapped a strand of embellishing thread around my fingers a couple times and then tied a knot in the center of that bundle. After trimming the ends, I glued it onto the card using a little bit of liquid glue. On this card project, I want to show you how the envelope goes together that comes with the design. This envelope is different than your standard A2 envelope. It's shaped more like a manila envelope. I'm just going to fold along all of the score lines that my Cricut created, using the end of my tweezers to burnish those folds. Then I'll adhere the flaps closed by placing a little bit of liquid adhesive on an old brush and brushing that adhesive onto the envelope flaps. Normally I would just use a tape runner or glue right along the edges. But since I don't want my adhesive to show on the vellum, I'm brushing it on with the old brush. As you can see, this is shaped a little bit differently than our typical envelopes. I'm planning on using a few of those Melissa Esplin handwriting lessons I took to address this card and hand deliver it. All we have to do is trim the ends of the thread and our card is complete. I love how elegant this card looks with that French vanilla cardstock and gold foil. Let's take a look at it compared to the original card. I love the simplicity and the elegance of this card cut out of French vanilla. I can't wait to give it to a friend. Let's move on to our third and final card alteration. By now you should know how to assemble this card. This one was done horizontally and I added some white ribbon across the top with a fun little whimsical bow. I hope you're able to see that faux stitching we created with the maker. This adds just a nice simple touch and is a great use of that perforation blade that you bought. The sentiment is coming from the Love These People stamp set, which is part of our April special. I'll be stamping that sentiment in intense black ink in the lower right-hand corner of the card. I really like the vintage typeset sentiments on this stamp set. This stamp set is from the These Are My People collection, which matches the papers that I used on the card. The sentiment I am using says "Better Together," and after I've stamped the sentiment, I'm going to grab a small little heart from that stamp set and add it onto the card next to the sentiment. What happened next did not get recorded. The battery died on my phone. After stamping these images, I grabbed some acrylic hearts and I threaded them through some twine to create a couple of little charms. Now I'm going to finish embellishing the card with some black and white dots. Our black and white dots are self-adhesive, so they are really easy to place onto your cards. I've added 3 small black dots next to the sentiment to help it stand out a little bit more, and then I'll add 3 white dots onto the card to help draw your eye down to the lettering. And now our third and final card is complete. Let's take a look again at all of the cards that were reimagined from this design. Here is the original card design from the Everyday Moments Cricut collection. It is a beautiful design and simple to make. I took this card design and created 3 cards that are similar but very different to the original design. I want to personally thank Jill and Close to My Heart for giving me the opportunity to share my card designs with you using the Heart of Gold card from the Everyday Moments collection. I hope that you are inspired to take a look at this card in the Everyday Moments collection and create one or two of the designs that I showed you today. New projects are added every week to my blog and YouTube channel. If you enjoyed today's card making project and wish to see more in the future, be sure to click that subscribe button and notification icon so that you are notified when new videos are added. If you wish to see more projects like this one or some more Cricut tutorials, you can click on the collection icons above. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.